Hi, welcome to Feedback Friday. It's Friday, February 15th, 2013. Feedback Friday is a service brought to you through move2nz.com in association with New Zealand Immigration and Settlement Services. And the idea behind these sessions is to give you good information on immigration matters, specifically around questions people are asking us. Unfortunately, Tammy's sick today and can't present the session for you, but so you'll have to stick with me. But the first question we've got today is from Veronica. So Veronica asks, what are the skills shortage lists? And this is a common question I get a lot. So there's a short answer and a long answer. So I'll start with a short answer, and you can bear with me for the long answer. Effectively, there are three lists. There's the long-term skills shortage list, the immediate skills shortage list, and the Canterbury skills shortage list. And what these do is they list occupations that New Zealand needs, basically. They also list requirements for those occupations for workers to be considered to be skilled. And that's something we'll get into in a minute. The lists are reviewed on an annual basis. The immediate skill shortage list and the long-term skill shortage list, rather, are reviewed on an annual basis, and they've just been reviewed, just updated. The Canterbury skill shortage list is reviewed on a more regular basis. It was last reviewed in November, and it's being reviewed again this month. So that tends to move more quickly. So the first we'll look at is the long-term skill shortage list. This, or LTSSL, it's a lot of acronyms in immigration that you'll need to get used to, I'm afraid. This relates to sustained and ongoing shortage. So these are people who New Zealand really needs. They tend to be in very highly skilled jobs. The needs right across the country, and the needs going on over a long period of time. Currently, there are 124 occupations on the list. 48 of these are in medicine. 25 are in technology, and 23 relate to engineering. So these tend to be very highly skilled jobs. This list importantly relates to residents. And if you gain employment in one of these occupations and you're considered to be suitably skilled, then you can potentially attract additional points under the skilled migrant category, making your application potentially easier. And you can also potentially access the work to residence visa route through the talent long-term skills shortage list stream. So this can give you an option of getting residency after a 2-year work visa through the residence from work scheme. Looking at the lists, one of the important things is there are two columns which define qualifications and requirements. And effectively, you're not considered to meet the requirements of this list, unless you meet these requirements in the columns. So the first column relates to the qualifications or requirements to actually be considered suitable to be able to claim that you're in a long-term skills shortage occupation area. And this can be through qualifications or it can be through work experience. Each of the occupations has potentially different requirements, and what you need to do is look at the list and see if you meet those requirements. The second column actually relates to the skilled migrant category points. There are bonus points available to people if they're in an area of long-term skill shortage, and often there are additional requirements. So to give you an example, university lecturer, to be considered to be in an area of long-term skill shortage, you would need to have a master's degree or a PhD as a qualification. But if you wanted to attract additional points through the skilled migrant category, you'd also need to have at least 12 months relevant work experience. So looking at the requirements, making sure you meet them before you assume that you are able to consider yourself to be on the long-term skill shortage list is very important. The second list we're going to look at is the immediate skill shortage list, or the ISSL. So this is completely different. It relates to skilled workers who are immediately required in New Zealand. And the main difference is this relates to temporary visas, not residents. So generally, this relates to work visas through the essential skills categories. There are currently 98 occupations listed on here. And again, there's a lot of medical, there's a lot of engineering, but there are other occupations like baker, jockey, ski instructor. There's a whole range of things on here. This list isn't always national. Sometimes it'll say all regions in the far right column, but sometimes it'll only say one particular region. And that's quite important because you'll only be able to use this as a way of getting a job more easily if you're actually trying to get a job in that particular region. So check the region before you make assumptions on that. The main reason you'd be wanting to have your occupation listed on here is labour market tests. So if you're applying for a temporary visa in New Zealand, a temporary work visa in New Zealand, you have to undergo a labour market check, which is a check to see if there are any New Zealand residents or citizens available to do the job you want to do. And effectively, an employer cannot offer you that job unless they can prove there are no New Zealanders available, unless you're on one of the skill shortage lists. So if you're on the skill shortage list, you don't have to undergo the labour market test. It means the employer can hire you more quickly, and it also gives you more transparency in that you've got a better and clearer route to getting work through a work visa in New Zealand. So this can make things a lot easier, and it can also give you an indication as to what jobs are in most need. That's quite important for anyone coming to New Zealand. The last list is the Canterbury Skill Shortage list, and yes, this relates to Canterbury, and it relates specifically because of the rebuild. So it's mostly to do with construction, planning, jobs around construction. So there are 34 occupations listed on this list, and again, if your occupation is on this list, it relates to temporary visas, so temporary work visas. It means you can avoid a labour market test. It means you can get into a job faster. It means it's easier for an employer to hire you from overseas. So I hope this answers your question, Veronica. There are three lists. The long-term skills shortage list relates to residency and occupations for residency. The immediate skills shortage list relates to temporary work visas, and the Canterbury skills shortage list relates to the Canterbury rebuild. And all of these lists relate to skilled jobs, and you have to prove that you're suitably qualified. As a final point, one of the questions that often goes next is, what if my job is not listed on one of the skills shortage lists? Sometimes people feel that if their job's not listed, then it means they can't get a visa. And this is not the case. So if you're applying for a residency visa, if you're coming through a residency category like the skilled migrant category, all it means is that you need to check that your occupation is skilled. So the Immigration Department has a list of 665 occupations which they consider to be skilled. If your job is on there, you have an option or an opportunity to apply for residency if you're suitably qualified. And again, that's something that you need to check. If you're applying for a temporary visa, it means that you'll probably have to go through the labour market test, which means that effectively an employer cannot offer you a job unless they can prove that they've made a genuine attempt to find New Zealanders first and couldn't find anyone who could be hired or who could be trained to do the job you're doing. So it's quite important to check your employability in New Zealand if you're thinking of coming here and getting a temporary work visa, talking to employers to make sure that they're having difficulty finding people with your skills and that your qualifications are accepted and that you also meet the requirements to be considered skilled in New Zealand. And that's something we'll cover under another question, but I hope this answers Veronica's question today. If people have concerns or they're not sure about their eligibility, they can contact me through Move to NZ. I have a profile on there. You can contact me through the forum, through the New Zealand Immigration and Settlement Services page, or through the immigration section. And that way I can answer your questions on Move to NZ. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed Feedback Friday.